and too many rules around the connection process between you and God. And you cannot ritualize your relationship and your connection with God. Let me say that one more time. You cannot ritualize your connection and your relationship with God, because in this human experience, you find yourself at different points every single day. So what may have connected you to God yesterday very quickly may take you a lot longer or different ways today. That is why you cannot just follow rituals. I cannot go through the process and say, okay, it's time to pray. Okay, it's time to meditate. Okay, it's time to burn my sage, because now I'm actually doing the opposite of connecting with God, and I'm plugging him in to a worldly way of rigidity, task, and accomplishment. Okay, God doesn't want to be accomplished. He wants to be connected with. You cannot routine God. You cannot make him a routine. You can make him a commitment and a priority. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You cannot make God a routine. You can, but you will lack the relationship and the true connection and intimacy with him. 100% you will. What he wants is your genuine heart and connection and intimacy and communication. And in order to do that, you can't schedule it. I can't schedule like, okay, like if I'm talking about like my partner, I can't be like, okay, at every day, I'm going to call him at this time so that I'm just checking things off the task list. Like I'm doing my things. I'm doing the things that you're supposed to do in a relationship. Like that just sucks the life out of a relationship. That's the same thing here. So we should not have spiritual rituals. We should have spiritual practices. And these should come from number one, first and foremost, our commitment to our relationship and connection with God, with source, with spirit. Okay. That's our number one priority. Welcome to Ignite the Spark Within, a podcast designed to do just that. Ignite your spark within you. I'm your host, Sarah Malone, owner of Spark Fitness and Lifestyle Coaching, and voted Yahoo Finance's top 10 female coaches to follow in 2021. I believe everyone has a fire inside them, a powerful purpose, a story waiting to be told, and everyone can uncover and unleash this power. Every day you have the choice to either let your experiences shape you or take control and use your experiences to shape the world around you. You were made to experience happiness, freedom, joy, purpose, love, passion, and abundance. Disrupt the status quo, think for yourself, and join forces with those around you doing the same. Join me for thought-provoking conversations along with the strategies needed in order to help you ignite your spark within. Welcome back to the show, everyone. First of all, I want to start this show by saying thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who's been listening to the past 67 episodes and even more of my content, for your genuine thirst and desire and passion for spiritual, mental, and emotional growth. And if you're a first-time listener, welcome to my show and get ready to dive in today because we are going deep. Today's topic is on bridging the gap between the human ego and the spiritual ego. And I found it important to reach and touch on this topic for multiple reasons. Number one, we're obviously in a season of spiritual awakening. And so a lot of people are being provoked, poked, and prodded in the spiritual sense. And this can be both beautiful and dangerous at the same time. And it's important that we have some guidance, information, knowledge, and understanding on this spiritual growth journey, because that is what we all are on. If you're living this life experience, this human experience, you are on a spiritual experience as well. And our mission, our goal, our focus should be to be growing in that spiritual process. And what true growth really means is that it's fruitful, right? We want to be able to show fruit for our labor in our spiritual growth. And What I really mean by that is that it should be benefiting the world. It should be serving the world in some way, shape, or form. And other people should be very aware, and it's very apparent, the fruit that we're producing with our own spiritual growth. Now, what can also happen in this spiritual journey is that we get lost in the process a little bit, and we transfer from one extreme end of the spectrum to the other. We go from a very human egotistical standpoint. And I'm not saying that you're egotistical. I'm just saying that there is a very human side to this ego that we call. And then we can go all the way through this process to the other extreme, which would be a spiritual ego. And we're going to talk about that. But the dangers of that are that we have a lot of leaders out there now, a lot of coaches and gurus and whatever they're calling themselves nowadays. I don't even know, gods and goddesses out there that are claiming to be guides on the spiritual process and are giving you lots of hope and empty promises of being able to guide you to your own salvation, right? And freedom. And we know that if we really sit with ourselves and we ask ourselves and our intuitive nature, if we can trust these people, the answer would be no. And the reason we can say no is because the fruit of their spiritual growth is packaged in another ego. And this goes really, really deep. And so it's a very complex topic that I'm going to do my best to allow myself to be guided in the words that are presented to you here today. I already feel that that is going to happen. And so I have a lot of hope. I've actually been sitting on this topic for weeks now, waiting for the the orchestration to be presented to me. And now that it has, I'm very excited to bring this, because I think it's very important that we have a bridge, that we can bridge the human world with the spiritual world, and we can find our place in that. And it can be murky, it can be muddy, and it can be painful at times, but all of it really should be productive, fruitful, and that fruit should be in the form of feelings that you acquire and develop through the process, and also what you're able to provide and then service to the world through that. So we're going to go on a journey here. Before we begin the show, I just have a couple of announcements. Number one, as always, I'm going to start the show by asking you to please rate, please share this show. It's nothing other than to reach more and more people with quality information, especially at such a time as and the rest of the world a favor if you just share. And if you do feel called, you can sponsor the show by adding a one-time or a recurring amount with the link in the show notes. And then the other announcement is the upcoming July retreat. It is now a co-ed retreat. We are still able to fill 6 more spots for this retreat. So I'm very excited to open the doors. Being out here in Arizona has been a new field for me in all the most beautiful ways. There's so many things to update you guys on, but that's not the purpose of today's show. But that being said, I've had a lot of men recently coming up to the surface and coming and they feel like, it feels like there is a pulling on the masculine, a pulling on the male to turn towards themselves and do the healing work. And so that being said, I've had a lot of requests for either co-ed or a men's only retreat. And so I am listening. And so the July retreat is co-ed. We are going to be hosting 4 days out here in Sedona, Arizona. It is July 20th through the 24th. Prepare for transformation. That's all I have to say. This program was designed with the help of God, and in seeing the structure and the order of events that would take one from chains in whatever capacity, at whatever level, to freedom, and freedom at the most simplest of ways, right? So anyways, if you're interested, please email me or message me on social media, or just head to the website and click the retreat link. Now, that being said, Let us discuss balancing and bridging this gap between the human ego and the spiritual ego. It's important that we go through a series of events here. We go through it, we walk you through a process of first understanding the different stages of awakening, because all of them are important, whether they seem human or spiritual, like whatever your definition of humanness or 3D-ness. And like, if that's, people think that, oh, you're living in the 3D and you must be like so low vibrational. It's like, well, we are in the 3D world. So like, all of this is relevant, all of it's important, all of it's necessary, and all of it is part of the awakening process, even your low vibrational states. So we're going to go through the different stages of the awakening and what happens at each stage of those, and the importance of each of them. If you were to be so aware to know, oh, I'm in this stage, so what am I looking for in this stage, right? It's like our journey is not always to look up to the next stage. Oh, I want to get higher and higher and higher all the time. It's like sometimes, and actually most often, the spiritual experience is really being able to, and being more quickly able to identify, where am I right now? What is the purpose of this season that I'm in right now? Like, what am I supposed to be gaining? What am I supposed to be equipping myself with, right? It's like a video game. It's like the levels of the video game. At each one, you're collecting different skills or tools or tokens that you will then need for the next level, and so on and so forth. So we're not just looking to jump levels and get higher and higher. We're looking to develop a deep wisdom and awareness of each level, of each stage, rather than level, because there's a hierarchy to that, and that can produce kind of a better or worse than. Then that's not what we're going for here, because all of these are necessary, and there's no such thing as good or worse or better or anything like that. So in this episode, we're going to go through the different stages of the awakening and what happens at each stage, how to bridge the gap between the human ego and the spiritual ego on this spiritual experience. We will talk about integration. We'll talk about the difference between spiritual practices and spiritual rituals, because this is very important. This is very important. This will allow you to decipher and discern between spirituality as a ego posturing tool and another way of control, and spirituality as a way of life. And then we'll also talk about the difference between meditation and prayer, the importance of each and both as it pertains to your own spiritual growth, how to implement all of these into your own spiritual growth path, and to find your way down the middle of all of this. Okay, like I said, this can get very complex. So I feel very excited to take all of this up here and bring it down to size, so that we have a deep, deep understanding of, number one, what we're looking for out in the world when we're seeing all of these spiritual postings and people and warriors and goddesses that are rising up in this age of light, quote unquote, light. But more importantly, it's like, this is for you. This is for you. This is for you to understand the path. And at the end of the day, what all of this is going to allow you to do is to experience more peace, experience more presence, and experience the true purpose of your individual life. So let's begin by going through the different stages of the awakening. And remember, all of this is part of the awakening journey. And, we can enjoy each part of it too. Okay, so there's 3 stages that I've identified and lumped together. Now, there, I'm sure, are different stages within these stages, but I want to go through the 3 main stages and see what happens and could happen in each stage that could veer us off the path and then bring us to the middle. So number 1, the first stage is the ignorant stage. This is like the stage where we could say the majority of our life up to a certain point of becoming curious about what's greater out there. This is the point where we're just enjoying the 3D world and all of the pleasures and temptations and immediate needs being met. This is the state where we are like, we don't think about tomorrow and the future and the greater purpose and depth and meaning of life. We're not thinking about that stuff. We're just thinking about like, how can I get the most pleasure out of my life and these people in it right here, right now. It's like this immediate need, just fixated on the 3D satisfaction and feeling like I'm filling whatever void without even seeking where that void is coming from. This is an ignorant stage, and all of us, well, actually, I can't say that. I think all of us go through this stage, and some of us go through it longer. The periods of time that we spend in this stage all are going to differ. Eventually, this enjoying everything in the 3D and just being here, just to see how I can benefit from it. It's basically just a selfish standpoint. And there ends up being a lot of suffering, right? So we go through this stage in the ignorant stage where we enjoy the 3D, we enjoy all of the perks, all of the pleasures, all of the temptations, we enjoy the tastes, the smells, the sex, the sensuality, the sometimes masochism. This leads to stage number 2 within this stage, which is suffering in the 3D. Right now, it's like, now we realize this is not, I don't like this. This is not fulfilling what I actually need at a deep level. This may be candy. It's like candy. It's like satisfying my craving in this moment, but it's not satisfying my thirst, my true hunger. It's not a meal. It's not sustaining me. And so I'm suffering because I'm realizing that what I'm doing is not supplying me with what I need, but I don't know what the heck I need. Okay, this is the stage probably, before our 30s, in our 20s, maybe teens, where we're out drinking and we're fighting and we're having sex and we're doing all the things, and we're really just immersing ourselves in trying to fill this void from something outside of ourselves in the world, right? This is what this stage is. And it leads to a lot of suffering. And some people actually are deeply aware of their suffering, and yet they continue to do the things that are causing their suffering. But somewhere along the way, and so this stage is really important, you guys, because what happens in this stage is that we must understand at a great and deep depth the pain that this stage causes us. And in fact, the deeper the pain we can experience at this level, the higher potential we have to rise in our spiritual journey of transcendence and ascendance and understanding the greater, and also the importance of it, because it's like friction, right? It's like pressure building. The more pressure that builds in this stage of ignorance, the more we appreciate and understand, and the more importance we take in that higher level of existence and understanding. And so this stage is important. Like I said, they're all important. And to be in tune with and understand your own suffering is extremely valuable. It's extremely valuable. The worst thing we can do in this stage is numb out and pretend that we're not suffering. Like a very common human tendency to do in this stage is to pretend or create a story in which we are lying to ourselves, to tell ourselves it's not that bad. I can do this. Like everybody does this. I'm just being crazy. I'm being sensitive and all of these things, instead of acknowledging and saying, no, I am suffering. This is not okay for me to live this way. And there's got to be something more, which when we get to that point of saying there's got to be something more, is the best position we could be in, because this is the transition to the next stage. So when we finally get ourselves to a point of saying there's got to be something more, which can take as long as you decide. Okay. We can suffer for a long time. We can suffer for a short time. We can suffer extremely, or we can suffer just a little bit. This is completely up to us because we have choice. And at any point, we can choose to say, I am going to take the blinders off now. I'm done suffering. I don't like this way of living. And I'm making a decision. Okay? Because when we decide, it is always followed up by action. No decision. Let me just say this right now. Oh my gosh. A decision is not a decision unless it is followed by an action. Otherwise, it's just a thought. Oh my gosh. Did you hear what I just said? A decision is only a decision when you act upon it. Like, when someone has made a decision, when you see them just change, like instantly, their actions change, everything changes. Otherwise, it's just thoughts, right? And we actually, this is the funny part, in this initial stage of ignorance is an immediate moment that any piece or portion of awareness comes to you that you are in a state of suffering and you have a thought, I want to change. I'm going to change. And you do not act on it. Number one, that's not a decision. That's just a thought. And number two, you are digging your hole even deeper, because the more times you think something like, I just need to make this change, I'm going to change, I can't stand this anymore, and then you don't do anything about it, you are making it harder and harder on yourself to get out. Why? Because you are hurting your confidence. When you say, I need to do this, I just need to do this, I should do this, I'm gonna blah, 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 on and on and on, our promises go to ourselves. And when we break those promises to ourselves, we are breaking our confidence and our commitment to ourselves. This harms us from taking actions in the future because we don't think that we're able to. So in this stage, it's like when, and everybody's point of this is so different, right? When we get to a point where our suffering is greater than the potential pain of changing, we will change. So like change is unknown, right? And especially in the spiritual sense, it's unknown. I don't know. I have no idea because I haven't experienced that yet. And that's kind of scary. And scary could mean pain. But we change, we go forward in a new way when the pain of where we currently are becomes greater than the potential pain of leaving that place. And some people, they just live their lives here because this is painful, yes, but at least I know it. It's like, at least this is a known pain. That over there, that change, that ascension, that rising, that growth, that's an unknown pain. And that fear is just too much for some people. Okay. But if you're not that person, and chances are, if you're listening to my show, you're not that person, this leads you to a seeking or curiosity of something greater. Like, how many of you listening to this show, you guys know me by now. This was born in me at a very young age. How many of you can say, looking back, that at a very young age, you just knew that there was something greater out there, right? There was just something in you that you just knew there was more to this life than this suffering. There's got to be more. Okay. And truth be told, I do believe that we all have this born inside of us. It's like, it just depends on, are we listening? Are we aware? What kind of circumstances? What is our environment in order to nurture and feed this curiosity within us? But we all have that seedling. We all have that spark of curiosity and of knowing and awareness that there is something greater at work, and that we are a part of that something greater. That's the most important part, is that we are a part of that something greater. And it depends on how strong are the circumstances and the environment in which you're in, whether that be people, places, or even your own mindset. Yes, your mindset is an environment in which you have total control over, but it's like, how strong are those circumstances and those variables in your life to say, to convince you, oh my gosh, to convince you of otherwise, to convince you that you are not a part of this something greater. That's the only thing that is really threatening our spirituality, is the thought that we get lost in this, like, I am worthless. There's like, where do I belong, and where do I find myself in this greater overarching orchestration of life? And it's like, the further we get away from that, knowing that we are a very important part of this greater purpose, the harder it is to break out of this first ignorant stage and into the next stage, which is the spiritual experience, or the spiritual awakening, or the spiritual transcendence and ascendance. Okay, we're all wanting to ascend, and all of it's great. So it's like this battle between those two beliefs. It's like, the stronger I believe and hold on to the belief that, yeah, I belong in this experience of something greater and I'm a part of it, then we have a lot more hope of immersing ourselves and really extracting the true meaning of this. So, we go from like, and then it's like, this sucks. This is like not fulfilling me. This 3D experience is now suffering. And then it leads us to, there's got to be something more. There's got to be something greater than this, current suffering. Okay. So this leads us to stage number 2, which is the spiritual experience. And there are, what I'd like to lay out to you today is 4 stages in this second stage of the spiritual experience, which is number 1, understanding, number 2, transcendence, number 3, disassociation, and then number 5 is sitting in the 5D. I'm sorry, suffering in the 5D. So this is a very ironic trajectory that we're on, that we go from enjoying the 3D, then suffering in the 3D, and somehow we end up suffering in the spiritual experience. Let me explain. So the spiritual experience has 4 different stages. Number 1, understanding. At some point, we understand, we begin to seek knowledge and seek wisdom, and we ask for, and we're open to receiving some level of understanding of, like, what is all of this? What is all of this? What is the world? What is the universe? What am I? Who am I? Who is God? Where is God? All of this. And there is so much information out there. The number 1 tool of this understanding I would like to very explicitly lay out is the Bible. Okay. If you want to learn about your spiritual self, you can look to the Bible. And then you also look to God. Like, you also look to your communication with and your connection to God. Because yes, the written word in the Bible and other spiritual texts will provide some level of understanding, of knowledge. And this is great. But how do we grasp that? How do we understand it at a level that's like now experiential? How do we grasp all of this information that we're taking now and make it experiential and at the point of understanding? Because understanding is different than knowledge. And let me point out the difference. Knowledge is reading something and knowing it. Understanding is actually embodying it and taking in to see how it orchestrates and plays into all the different facets and roles and levels and dimensions of life. Okay, it's one thing for me to say, like, read in the Bible, God is love. Okay, I know that now. Cool. God is love. What does that mean, though? What does that mean? Okay, so I keep seeking in this spiritual experience, I keep seeking to understand, what does that actually mean for God is love? And then it comes in the form of a feeling that just takes over you, and it weaves itself into every fiber of your DNA. And it becomes like a part of who you are. And you're like, oh my gosh, I get it. I get what that means, that God is love. It's like, that's all there is. That's all there is. Like, if God is love and God is everywhere, right? He's the beginning and the end. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He's all these things. And everything that was created by God is good, and everything good was created by God. Then that means that, like, everything is just love. And so am I. And I can express that. And it's like, it's not a feeling, it's a being. It's literally like substance. Okay. This is what I mean by the difference between knowledge and understanding. Because if you just hear that God is love, you're like, that brings a little bit of comfort. And that's great. That's great to have. And if that's all you desire and that's all you need, then that is totally fine. But if you're like me, and if you're like many others, you want to really grasp what that means. And also, we're called to do that, by the way, by saying that we are building a relationship and that we should seek a relationship with our Creator. That's what that means. It's like, you don't just stop. Here's the thing. Oh my gosh. When you are building a relationship with someone, anyone or anything, you don't just stop at the level of like knowing facts about them. Like, my partner, my significant other, like, I don't want to just know, where were you born? Like, what happened in your life? I don't want to just know all these things. And what do you do? What do you like to do? What's your favorite color? Like, I don't want to know all of these things. I like, sure, that's great to know because it helps me maybe a little bit. But I want to understand that person. I want to know why. I want to know to what depth, to like how I want to know all the mechanisms of this person. This is called building a relationship. That's called love. And that's what we're called to do in this spiritual experience of seeking understanding, okay, of God. Because, oh my gosh, this is so good. It's like, when we're truly after an intimate relationship with Jesus and with God, then we are really trying to understand the mind of God, the heart of God. And when you think about that, the mind and heart of God is in everyone, in everything. And this is what we'll talk about in integration, but this is so good, is it allows you to open up a new realm of possibilities of understanding this world, other people, your place in it, and everything that's existing, everything that's happening and going on. Okay. And if you're doing this from a place of, which usually in the beginning of this stage, you are doing it from a place of genuine curiosity and childlike, just trying to figure it out because you're hungry, you're thirsty. You're also a little bit humble because you just came from a suffering state in 3D. You just came from a suffering state in the human experience. And you're like, ew, no, I don't know what I was doing before, but I don't like it. And I need something new. So I'm seeking, right? I'm in this space of seeking, understanding. And so I'm more open to take in all of that. And this is great because what it does is it causes us to transcend in some way. We begin rising up, not rising up in a way of posturing, but rising up in a way of like, we're elevating ourselves. We are now able to grow and see now above the trees. Like, I'm looking out, like, let's say I was just at the forest floor. I was like laying there looking up at the trees, like, oh my gosh, there's something up and out there. And now as I begin this understanding, I'm growing, and I can grow up through the trees so I can see above everything that's going on. And I can actually see, whoa, oh my goodness, this is so much, right? This is so much because I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. That's what the transcendence is. The transcendence is the rise out of a place, like a position where you cannot see. It's like being in the valley versus being at the peak where you can see far out. You can see like all the way around, 360-degree view. You can also see the valley in which you once were. And you're like, wow, I was there. Okay, this is the transcendence. You have like the opportunity to see. You can see like peak to peak. You can see the sky, and you can also see the valley from which you just came. And this provides such wisdom and like this experience of, wow, I am amazing. Okay. And being up here can cause us to feel the next stage of this process, which is disassociation, right? Because upon awakening, this is interesting, right? Psychedelics have a good way of doing this and bad way of doing this. Psychedelics have the ability to awaken us to such a place where we are massively shown, and we experience in a massive and extreme way what the world, what life, what energy, what love, what God really is, like in an instant. Okay, it's like you go into this black hole wormhole tunnel of all of now, holy crap, in an instant I know it all, or I think I know it all, right? This is the problem. So we go into this space now where we think we know it all, and it happens in an instant, and all of a sudden now you try to go back into your everyday life with the everyday people that were in the old version of that, and there's a level of disassociation where you feel like, what am I doing here? Right? And if you haven't experienced this, you're probably listening to this portion of the show being like, yeah, I don't really relate to that. I don't really resonate with that. I encourage you to continue to listen anyways, because this will be your warning for when this does happen to you. And I'm sure it will, either in this lifetime or the next. In either case, it's a good learning experience in which you can listen back and extract something at a different point in your life. So I encourage you to dive in here. This disassociation happens because we experience, or so we think we experience, the know-it-all portion of spirituality. Like, oh my gosh, that's what this really is. And then now I go back to my 3D job and my 3D world with my 3D people who are really low vibration. And like, what am I doing here? And we find ourselves in a new spot of suffering. Oh my gosh, this is so good. It's like we find ourselves now in a new spot of suffering. Like, I don't belong here. Oh my gosh, this is horrible. Like, why did I seek this level of understanding? Because now you get presented with like how you've basically screwed up your life in a weird way, but you haven't screwed up anything. This is the encouraging part. You just think that you have, because you go from experiencing such transcendence and like bliss and like understanding, wow, this world and all of the deep meaning and also all of the non-meaning, like it's all just going round and round and round, and we're a part of all that round and round and round. And then you think like, oh my God, this is meaningless. Is it meaningless? Like, all these weird questions begin to arise, and I encourage you to ask all of them, because all of these questions are welcome, and it's again all part of the awakening process. But this disassociation causes a new sense of suffering, but now this time in a 5D situation, as you come back to the reality of your 3D world, now having experienced a 5D experience of what everything is and what you are and what God is. And so we can also find ourselves in a spot in this place where we stop and we try, oh my gosh, we attempt to stay at the peak, either through psychedelics or through meditative or breathwork experiences or whatever. I mean, and you could maybe even not truly be on the peak, but you present yourself like you are on the peak. And this is where we come to a point of spiritual ego, in which we think, oh my God, we think that because we've been exposed to the secrets of the world and of the universe, that now we are better than those who have not been, or who are not in search of that yet. Okay. This is a very dangerous place to be, because this is the spiritual ego that says, I'm better than so-and-so because I know this, or I'm better than, I'm better than my partner because I'm higher vibration. I'm better than my mom. I'm better than my friends. And we can isolate ourselves. It's like we can isolate ourselves in this stage for two reasons. Number one, the disassociation, in which we're like, I don't relate to any of you people, because not because we think that we know it all, but just because it's like we're seeking something more. We're seeking connections and communications of more depth, of greater depth. And so this disassociation or this isolation happens in this stage because we're like, man, I refuse to associate myself now in those low vibrational states with people who aren't seeking, they're not aligned with me, right? Like we don't resonate. We're not meeting here. And if you're watching this, you could see my hands are just kind of at level with each other. It's like, we're just not matching anymore. And let me just say this, that is a completely fine place to be. And it's actually a necessary part of this, this stage number 2 in this disassociation, because in a time you may want to almost hibernate yourself. You allow, oh, you allow those relationships that served you in a 3D learning experience to fall away, and allow yourself to really fully, number one, fully experience your spiritual growth in this new expanded consciousness. But you also allow those relationships that were just lessons for the past to fall away, because when you isolate yourself in this growth, they naturally will fall away, because they're not supposed to be with you going forward. And if you're really doing this process right, if you're really actually following the spiritual path in an aligned way, you will recognize that none of those relationships should hold or should create negative feelings in you for what they were, because you know that they were part of your learning and your spiritual growth process. Okay. This is how we get to, an integrative period, which is the next stage. Guys, I know that this has got to be like a 2-hour show. We're going to make this a 2-hour show because there's so much here and I haven't even gotten to trust yet. So we're in this stage, right? And it's like, or we can disassociate and we isolate ourselves because we position ourselves on a pedestal. We project ourselves in such a way that says, I am more righteous than so-and-so. I am more righteous than you, and I am supposed to lead. Like, this is what I'm a spiritual leader, and this is my position, and this is what I'm supposed to do. And it's like, this is so funny, right? Because it's contradictory to the spiritual process. Like, there's no ego in a true spirituality. Not to say that the spiritual process doesn't contain or have ego, because it's part of it too. But the whole, like, if people try to tell you, like, that there's such highly ascended beings, and they're projecting this ego of needing, like, you need everybody to know who you are. You need everybody to know that you're a leader. You need everybody to know that you're so spiritually gifted and divine and magical and all these things. It's like, that is spiritual ego. Is you just went from one form of ego in the 3D human aspect of ego-ness, and we all know the suffering that the ego can cause us, even though we need the ego to experience this human experience. But now we go and we awaken. We don't awaken ourselves, but we become awakened by our curiosity, and then by putting ourselves in a position of receiving. And then we start suffering again. We start suffering because whenever we're in ego, there is inevitably suffering. And so I look at people like Aubrey Marcus. This is like, I bring him up so much because this is like the definition of spiritual ego and how it can go dark real quick. Okay. This is like somebody where it's just exuding from his pores that there is an injured soul in there that is just obsessed with and longing to be like transmuting all of these things and then be known for it, right? And posturing oneself as this spiritual warrior powerhouse. And I don't bring him up to just completely bash on people. It is just an example. It's a beautiful, beautiful example of how and why actually the importance of this episode to begin with is to talk about what to look out for in these spiritual leaders. Like if you're presenting yourself as a leader, oh my God, if you're presenting yourself as a leader, nonetheless, in a spiritual sense, like in the spiritual realm, then that's not to say you're going to be perfect, but it should be absence of ego, meaning you're not using your spiritual knowledge in order to gain your 3D ego needs or fill those wounds. Okay, this is all that is. It's like I still have those human 3D wounds that now I'm just using spirituality to posture and my knowledge of the spiritual realm to posture myself to feed those very wounds that I tried to get away with in 3D way. We've just transferred suffering from 3D to 5D. So are you really living in that transcended place? I would beg to differ, and I would say no. You're just using your knowledge from that experience to do the exact same thing that your ego wanted to do when you were unawakened and ignorant. Okay. Oh, that's so good. Okay. So this brings us to the third stage, in which not everybody gets to, but it's my prayer and it's my hope that this episode and this, this teaching and any other teachings that I do going forward, whether at retreats or seminars or on stages, would provide the tools and the understanding of how to do this portion of it, which is integration. It's like, how do we, number one, how do we get ourselves to enjoy the human experience with this new transcended state of mind? Place like once we realize the meaning of life and everything out here, we can either go down a rabbit hole of depression because we're like, oh my God, it's all meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Like you kind of are like, well, none of this crap matters then. None of all of this, like my old stuff that I was focused on, the chasing the home, the chasing the career, the rat race, all of the stress, all of this, none of this crap matters. Okay. Or we can, so it's like, how do we enjoy this human experience now with what we know? And how do we not allow ourselves to get caught up in pleasure in the 3D versus like enjoyment? Like, how do we understand the difference between pleasure and enjoyment and how to like integrate all of these pieces? And what it truly comes down to is non-attachment. This concept of non-attachment is one of my favorites because it's not saying that I'm detaching myself from all of these things. It's not saying like, oh, then screw it. I don't want the house. I don't want the car. I don't want the relationship. I don't want the this. I don't want the that. Like it's not detached. It's not like repelling things, right? Because when we're in a state of repelling things, we're not in a state of love. Love may automatically repel certain things just by the nature of what love is. It's going to repel fear. It's going to repel anger. It's going to repel guilt, bitterness, shame, regret. It's going to repel all of these things, this beautiful and blissful state of love. But it doesn't do that from a defensive place. It does that from a place of just being what love is. Yeah, I might be going off on a tangent here, but so this state of non-attachment is not to say I'm okay, I'm going to take action, I'm going to detach, but rather this space of integration. Something happens automatically as you settle into and commit your life and yourself more and more to being love. And what love is it's not gripping, not controlling, it's not pushing, it's not provoking. And the Bible talks a lot about what love is and what love isn't. But I'm specifically talking about this state of non-attachment. The opposite of those two, of the opposite ends of non-attachment, would be attachment and detachment. And what we want to get to is a place of non-attachment, where we're not necessarily detaching, meaning pushing ourselves away from things, but we're also not attaching ourselves to those things, whether those be things, people, careers, places, anything. It's not like, the attachment to this whatever, fill in the blank, is dictating or is defining my worth, my success, it's not like saying, whether or not I'm doing a good job in this life or not. And it's also not saying like you're doing a bad job, okay, if you don't have these things. But when we awaken and we realize that the car and the house and the money and the career and all of the things that we were chasing in this 3D experience are really meaningless, like that's not really the true meaning of life. We understand that they're void, they're empty of meaning in just the simple pursuit of them. It is like abundance is not things. Abundance is a state of mind. It's a state of the heart. And same with peace. Peace doesn't come like when you have all of the things and you can just relax. It's like, I'll relax when I get to such and such a place. It's like, no, you won't. You'll probably be just as stressed, but you won't have anything to do with it anymore. It's like before you had all this chasing and ways to exert your energy and express and release all of the energy of the stress of your own being inside in the state of mind of your stressed mind. And then it's like when you do all the things you said you were going to do, you're going to still be in that stress state of mind, only worse. You're not going to have an outlet. And so what do? It's like you find things to release that on, whether it be anger or sex or drugs or whatever, addiction. And so it's like you realize that none of those things really matter. And so now you're like, let's get rid of them all. But the real truth, the real way to integrate all of this is by approaching and achieving a state of non-attachment. And non-attachment says, the things are nice, but if they were to be gone tomorrow, I would still be okay. I would still be great. I would still be me. I would still be love, and I would still be loving. I would still be serving the world. And it says, but you can go, people in my life, you can go. But I'm still me, and that's still okay. And whether or not you go or whether or not you stay, doesn't have anything to do, or it doesn't have any effect on my own worth and myself, and whether or not I'm still pursuing what I'm supposed to be pursuing, which is my own individual purpose and calling and destiny. And so this state of non-attachment is just like, now I'm just in this state of being, and I can say, I can appreciate a good meal. I could appreciate a good meal and the pleasure that that brings, but I'm not like, I don't need the pleasure, right? I'm not like, when's my next sexual encounter? When's my next great meal? I need these worldly pleasures. It's like you get to a point where you're like, everything becomes pleasurable, really, because it's the whole experience of life. And you're like, you step outside and you smell the smells and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so pleasurable. And then I can go back inside and find pleasure in the shade or the shelter. So it's like, it's really just pleasure in everything. And if it happens to be a car, then so be it. I mean, if it happens to be a good meal or sex with your partner and I do not encourage, social sexual encounters. I think that's extremely demeaning and detrimental and harmful to your soul's health. I know this from experience, and from experience, from watching and doing and being that. And so what I'm saying is that you find pleasure in all of these things, but you don't need them. You're not seeking them. You've finally put down the searching, the seeking for pleasure, because just by existing in this form that you were designed in is pleasure. Everything is pleasurable now. And so I had a question the other day, how do you still find like enjoyment in this human experience now, with how what they say, how conscious you are? And it's like, well, actually, I find more enjoyment in this human experience because I know what the meaning of it is. I know the purpose of it. I know that, like, I don't want to just like go into my infinite body yet, because until it's my time, you know what I mean? Because like I'm here for a reason. And that is so pleasurable to know that. So it's like, once you know the purpose, you almost want to string it out. It's like, I want to milk every moment of this life's experience, because I know that's what I'm here to do. So it's like the integration now that I want to talk about. This is the last stage, like this, the integration between the human ego and the spiritual ego is really coming to a point of saying, like, it's a non-attachment and non-judgment place, right? It's like we're in the human ego, and excuse me, we're in the human ego, and we find ourselves judging ourselves and others, and we're in a space of suffering. And then we awaken and we gain all of this understanding and knowledge and transcendence and consciousness. And we are this great high being, right? We are this high priestess and high priest and whatever people want to call themselves these days. And we're judging everybody who doesn't see themselves that way. It's like, oh, you asleep being over there, you peasant, the spiritual ego takes over. And really that is not a spiritually ascended being at all. They are saying they're ascended because they've learned about what God is and what the universe is and what energy is and all of these things. And actually, in reality, they know nothing about it, because if you knew something about it, your spiritual ego wouldn't exist. At least it's may for a time, but you then desire to enter into a state where you see everyone as love. You see everyone as purposeful. You see everyone as a divine image of God, because that's what they are. And you see them from a place of non-judgment now, and also non-attachment. Non-judgment meaning I have an annoyance with humanity and being so weak at times, of just caving into their weaknesses and their fears and their immediate pleasures and temptations, because it can hold back the collective humanity in such massive, massive ways. That's what we're finding right now. And yet I can look at them with love and reverence too, to say they are just doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're just being who they're supposed to be being. And I can, from my position of consciousness and understanding and wisdom, still be okay to witness their state of being and the choice of being unaware and unawake, without being angry or triggered in responses, or being jaded towards humans and society. And this is really what the integration period is all about. It's getting to a place of being like, okay, I am where I am, and you are where you are, and all of that is okay, and all of that is perfect. And would I like you to awaken and discover greater freedom and purpose and joy and love and passion and all of these things? Absolutely. I want all of peoples to do that. And I believe that eventually we will in heaven, as heaven is approaching earth. But I don't need that to be okay in my process. As a matter of fact, I see the purpose in all of the levels of awakening and all of the people's purposes within that. It's like some people's purpose is to be unawake and serve as a lesson and inspiration and motivation for you and I, or me and whoever else, to fulfill our purpose, to help people. It's like all of it is so perfect. All of the awakening stages, even the ignorant ones, are purposeful. And we can look at them and say, I see your purpose. I see you, and I love you anyway. No matter if you agree with me or not, or disagree, or want to stay in your suffering or not, right? I love you. That doesn't mean that I have to come down for you. But I can love you, and I cannot judge you. And I can also know that I'm not better than anyone else because I've chosen to do this work. This is really what integrating and balancing the human ego and the spiritual ego is really about. It's like, instead of living in the state of human ego where we're just trapped in our own suffering and we're succumbing to the pressures and pleasures of everything that our human ego wants us to do, whether it's to protect us or to fill a need, versus the spiritual ego saying, I'm posturing myself on this pulpit and I'm saying that I know it all, and I'm a leader and you should follow me, because if you don't, then you're stupid. That's the spiritual ego. And the balance between the two is saying, thank you, thank you, thank you for showing me all that is, and for working this process in me individually, right? This is about me. It's like kind of selfish in a way, but it's like, it is. This whole thing is about you and you alone and how you fit into it. And everything else that's going on outside of you is just a happening. And your spirituality, the place that you sit, then wherever you decide to sit, I can come down the mountain and I can still sit in my spiritual place and be peaceful. And I can appreciate now the view from a different point of view, from a different level. And you can do that whenever you want. So that was a lot on the stages. Just to recap really quick before we move on. We talked about the different stages of the awakening process. Stage number 1 is ignorance. And what happens in there is, number 1, first enjoying the 3D existence. Number 2, then suffering in 3D. And then that leads us to seeking something greater, leading us to this spiritual awakening. And what happens here is understanding. We understand what it all means. Transcendence. Now we're rising higher. We're raising our vibration. And then then what happens is disassociation or potentially isolation. And then what happens is a new state of suffering, but suffering now in the 5D state. This leads us to our 3rd stage, which is integration, and then coming back into the 3D experience with our 5D consciousness, and being able to integrate ourselves now as this conscious, quote unquote, higher level being, but in the human experience. This is beautiful because this is exactly where our purpose is. Now, this episode is getting long, but it's so good and it's so needed. I want to transition now into this difference between on this path, because so here's where we're going to go next. Is with all of that being said, all these stages, that's great, right? That's all information. And you can probably say, okay, oh yes, I'm in this stage. I'm at this place, and cool. I find myself at that stage. And now you know either where you're going, or you can say, yes, for sure. I'm right here. I'm at this point. So I have to be aware of these things, right? It gives you information about what to do with where you are now. And it also gives you information to say, okay, if I'm at this point, then I am on my way to this new point. Okay, this is very, very beneficial, and it's valuable information to have. So let's talk about how to use all of the concepts that are being thrown out to us in this spiritual awakening world with all of these voices on social media, blessing and a curse. To use it actually in this integrative format. Now let's integrate all these tools, and the tools would be the trust, what the terms trust and faith. The second tool is going to be prayer and meditation. And the third tool is going to be spiritual practices and spiritual rituals. Ugh. All right, that one's going to be a big one. So hang tight here. So first, let's dive into trust and faith, right? Everybody in the spiritual community says, trust or surrender, have faith. What is the difference? It's like, what do you mean by that? So let's break it down. Let's first of all determine and decide that trust and faith are different. Okay. The difference between trust and faith. Trust is something that you actually build. You're a part of the building process of that. Like you do something, then you see an outcome, and then you begin to develop and form trust. You actually exercise trust because you do something, then you see an outcome, then you do a little assessment period. You kind of like analyze it, like what just happened when I did this action. Oh, yes, that was for me. I realized how I was supported in that. Now I trust. Okay. No, who do you trust? Well, you trust God. You trust God, and you also trust yourself. You're building trust with yourself in partnership with God. Oh my gosh. That is what building trust is. Like, we could say, I don't trust you. It's like what you're really saying actually is that you don't trust yourself because your actions, your actions led you to a situation or a person that was not good for you. So it's like our trust just got harmed in that. So trust is something that's built. You can't just be like, trust me. And then I'm like, well, like, why? What experiences do I have with you that I should trust? But I'm willing to try. So I'm going to do these actions. I'm going to put myself out there, and then I'm going to see the result. And then I'm going to say, that was good. I'm building that trust. Okay. Faith is different. So trust is like you do something, you see it works, and you build trust, both with yourself and with yourself in partnership with God, because you see that when you listen or when you take an action that you feel is directed by him and he shows up in a miraculous way, you're like, whoa, I really trust, number one, my ability to hear you. And I trust your direction and your ability to show up and support me. Okay, that's trust. Faith is something different. Faith is something that you do not do anything for. You literally just generate it without there being any clear proof or reason to have the faith. It's like irrational, right? So if we were to compare these two things in an analogous perspective, we would say trust is like building a parachute and then trusting that it will open and when you jump off the cliff. And a faith is like jumping off the cliff and just having the faith that either a parachute will show up or that you'll land softly without harm. These are the two different ways that you can think of trust and faith. Now, it is important in this spiritual journey that we have both, because we cannot just be like, I have faith. I have faith and it's all going to work out. And I'm just going to sit here and, allow everything that God's doing to happen for me. I mean, faith, you need faith because you need faith in order to jump off cliffs, leave situations, pursue situations that don't make any sense to other people. It's like people on the outside would be like, wow, what is this person doing? Right. And you're like, I don't have faith. I don't have any clear proof that that something is working or something is out there, but I have faith that it is. So I'm going to go into the desert without any water and have faith that I'll find a river or that it will rain or that God will provide water in some way, shape, or form. But it's also important that we have trust, you guys, because because in trust, your participation is a requirement. And what makes this spiritual journey and growth journey so fulfilling is your participation in it. And it's those moments where you're like, you actually do some work behind the scenes to say, like, for instance, like, I trust that all of the hard work that I do behind the scenes that shows absolutely no fruit yet, I trust that I'm building a foundation for something that is coming in the future. Okay. That's trust. I'm trusting in the call of my life to spend countless hours behind the scenes working on things that show no immediate fruit or monetization or that make sense. But I trust that the vision that I have seen and been provided, I trust that that's where I'm going and that all of these things are going to be needed eventually. That's trust, you guys. And this partnership between trust and faith is so important in your spiritual journey because you're, number one, you're communicating to God that you are willing to participate and to break a sweat in the process, right? And then number two, you're saying, but I also know that it is not by my works. Oh my gosh. That it is not by my own works and my deeds that all of this will manifest itself and be created. But I have faith that you, God, are doing things that don't make sense. I have faith that you are doing miraculous things, whether I see them yet or not. When you have someone and when you are operating from a place of this combination, this little ping-ponging of trust and faith, this is like a lethal and unstoppable combo. It's like that person who is so in tune and cohesively moving with God that it is just so obvious, like that they're moving with trust and they're sitting in faith. Okay. So again, trust is like you must act and analyze, pause and reflect and understand that really everything is happening for you. And also the portion of that too, guys, is that the trust is to say, okay, I don't always understand, right? I don't always understand what is happening, but my trust allows me to know that anything that is happening is going to be worked for my good. Oh my gosh. This is trust. See, trust doesn't just have to do with like, did it work out the way that you wanted? Okay. Trust is like, I trust you, God. I trust that all of this is always happening for me. So whether or not I got what I wanted, even though I put a great effort into it, right? I expended myself energetically or emotionally or mentally. I put a lot out there. Like that was energetically taxing. And I got to tell you, God, it just didn't work out the way I thought it was going to work out. But I trust that all of this is working for my good. And so that's not going to stop me from continuing to do my part moving forward. It's not going to stop me from putting forth the effort, from putting forth the work, from expending my energy, from really putting myself out there. Okay. This is so important. But this combo between trust and faith also requires you to move without seeing what's next. And actually, that's all we're ever doing. Like, there's no way to know what's next. There's no way. There's no way to have control because you could do everything you know and are capable of doing and still not get what you thought you were going to get. But I trust and I have faith that whatever I'm getting, this is the beautiful part, really. When we let go in this moment, when we let go and we're simply operating from a place of trust, faith, and love, we do our part. We trust in the outcome that is going to be for us. And we have our faith to carry us through that says, I trust and I have faith that whatever my efforts are meant to produce, like whatever it is that I need is going to be provided, not based on like what I do. Oh my gosh, this is so good. Not based on necessarily what I do, but based on my ability to say, okay, I'm going to do my part and I don't have an expectation of what it should look like. Rather, I actually don't want to have expectations. That's like the worst place to be because my human limits are going to like create something that's really subpar for what God really has in store for me, right? So I'm going to say, I'm going to do my part And then I'm going to have faith and I'm going to trust. And I'm just going to ask that whatever it is, God, that you know that I need, you're going to provide, because I know that that is so much greater than I could even conjure up. So I actually don't want to have an outcome in mind. As you know, your mindset and mental motivational gurus and motivational speakers would tell you the exact opposite. I'm going to tell you, don't have an outcome in mind, because your outcomes are going to be limited by your experiences or what you've seen. And God has no limits. Love has no limits. So what you think that you could get based on your own limited experiences and what you've been exposed to, your expectations of an outcome are going to be limited on what you've been exposed to. Oh my gosh, let me say that again. Your expectations of an outcome are going to be limited to what you've been exposed to. And if you limit yourself to what you've been exposed to or experienced, you will limit the amount of blessing that you can welcome into your life when you trust and have faith, because trusting and having faith is the opposite of having an idea or expectation of an outcome. Letting go of the expectation and the outcome and having trust and faith that all of what you're doing as you listen to God is going to put you into the position to receive everything that He has in store for you. Oh my gosh, that is huge. That is huge. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up briefly as I possibly can, with the difference between meditation and prayer. As a part of your spiritual practices, meditation and prayer are essential. Most people just turn to meditation and they forget about prayer. And some people in the religious sect would only focus on prayer and then forget about meditation. But we should be integrating both of these. And the difference between the two is this: meditation is a place where you go to receive and to listen and to take in. It's a humble place to be, where you're saying, just equip me with the knowledge, whatever information you need me to know right here. And it's also being able to get still enough to separate the busyness of your thoughts with the embodiment of your being. This is what meditation is. The Bible says to meditate on the word. And so we should really be meditating on God's word. We shouldn't just be like trying to empty our mind, because let me tell you, an empty mind is a dangerous place to be. It leaves you susceptible and open and vulnerable and at risk and in a threatening place to be attacked by other entities. In the spiritual realm, we have both light and dark. Don't forget that. And so by emptying our mind, we also empty ourselves of the armor in which we should be equipping ourselves with to protect ourselves against the dark parts of spirituality. And I know a lot of people would say that the dark is necessary too. And yes, this is the case. But do you really want to welcome darkness into your mind? There's a difference between darkness, like dark evil, and your shadow, right? We should be facing our shadow. We should be turning towards our shadow. But there is a very big difference between your shadow, meaning the shadow that your ego has created, and the darkness in the spiritual realm. So let us be very clear that we should not be emptying our mind. Okay. Let me just be very clear about that. But we should be meditating in a way that is in search of and intention to connect greater with God, to say, hey, what divine wisdom do you need me to know right now? And I'm open to receiving that. I surrender myself to you. Okay. Prayer is where we go to communicate our thanksgiving, our worship, our petitions, our desires to God. It's a place where we go to really nurture that relationship and communicate directly with God. It's like, it's like meditation is receiving a voicemail and listening to it, and you're like, oh, I really needed that. And then prayer is like calling God and actually having a conversation or leaving him a voicemail, right? So it's like we need both. Otherwise, you're just taking in meditation. And you're not really like it's a one-way street. We want to be in communication in both ways with God. We want to be in collaboration with him. So the danger though of like only praying, and that this is something that highly religious people, not even highly religious, but just the modern day religion and churches would only talk about prayer, but you miss out on hearing God's voice if you don't include meditation in that. Prayer is just like here, like usually we find ourselves just asking for things, and usually we do this from a place of like lack, or when we're really in a painful spot, we pray, oh, God, take me out of this and help me through this. And that's great because it brings us to God. But like, God also wants to tell us some things, and he wants us to be humble enough to sit still, to say, okay, I don't always have to talk to you, God. I don't always have to like make my petitions and prayers known. I can listen to you as well. And that's what we're demonstrating in a state of meditation. And so these are the differences between the two. And that's why it's important to include both the listening and the state of humility, to ask what is needed for us, and then the ability to put our petitions out there. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before wrapping this episode up, and this is very important because this is the sticky situation in the spiritual community right now. This is the place where like a lot of people are promoting their rituals and ritualistic behavior. And so we're going to talk about different spiritual practices and the difference between like, first of all, what makes a practice spiritual? And second of all, spiritual rituals and the difference between and the dangers of having rituals, right? Number one, no practice in and of itself is spiritual. Like I can't just say I'm waving around crystals and burning sage and that's my spiritual practice. It's like, what makes that spiritual? Because it's crystals and sage? Like the spiritual practice can be doing your dishes. Like you can make any practice that you do, anything spiritual. What makes something, anything, any practice, habit, or even just a deed or task, like you could be gardening and it's spiritual. What makes a practice spiritual is your ability, is it should pass this test, right? Does doing this thing allow me to enter into a state in which I feel more connected to God? Like I feel that connection. Okay. If the answer is yes, okay, then that's very spiritual. If making love to your husband or wife feels like you are getting closer to, then that's spiritual. If doing the dishes and just being in that zone is bringing you closer to God in that moment, that's spiritual. But what I'm finding is all these practitioners out there promoting and taking videos. First of all, like if you're taking a video of your spiritual practice, I don't know what the odds are that you are actually in a spiritual place because you're thinking about yourself being filmed. Like that's just an oxymoron to me. And I pray that you guys have enough common sense and discernment to be able to decipher between the difference there. Because like if I'm watching these videos, I'm watching these reels and they're like doing these breathing and crying and releases and like different movements and all the essential oils. And I just want to ask myself, like, what are you doing? And then number two, the question is like, why are you doing that? And you're saying that this is a spiritual practice. And I want to ask you why, right? Like me putting essential oils on my trigger points, it may actually be more health related than it is spiritual. What makes something spiritual is if you're able to connect, because in this human experience, we find ourselves moving along this spectrum of connection and disconnection, or an illusion of disconnection between God. We're moving on this spectrum of I feel so close and I feel one with God, towards like, ooh, I feel really disconnected right now. I need to bring myself back into that state of awareness of my connection with God. Okay. This is a spiritual practice, and it can be as simple as sitting there for 2 minutes in the morning, just breathing and just feeling and just getting back into your body. Okay. These spiritual practices, I want to warn you guys, like, you choose your spiritual practices. There is no one size fits all. There is no rule book to say that you have to wave around a bunch of sage and line up your crystals in some certain format in order to invite spirit in. Listen, spirit and God is always present. It's whether or not you're aware of it and whether or not you're open and you're receiving and you're making yourself present, right? He's always present. Spirit is always present. Are you? That's the question. And my challenge for you, or my question that may challenge you, is to say, I want to invite you to be curious in discovering what practices allow me to be present, to get myself into a state of presence with God. He's present. Now, how do I make myself present? And then do that. Now, what we're really saying is that this awareness should be in our hearts, right? And if it takes me 2 minutes of sitting here, right there, I just entered into a state of presence. Actually, I felt that this whole episode, it took me one breath to get my heart into an awareness and a presence and a connection with God. And sometimes, some days, that takes you one breath. And sometimes that process takes you 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. And so this is where I want to warn you against rituals. Because rituals actually limit. They put confines, they put borders, they put laws and too many rules around the connection process between you and God. And you cannot ritualize your relationship and your connection with God. Let me say that one more time. You cannot ritualize your connection and your relationship with God, because in this human experience, you find yourself at different points every single day. So what may have connected you to God yesterday very quickly may take you a lot longer or different ways today. That is why you cannot just follow rituals. I cannot go through the process and say, okay, it's time to pray. Okay, it's time to meditate. Okay, it's time to burn my sage, because now I'm actually doing the opposite of connecting with God. I'm plugging him in to a worldly way of rigidity, task, and accomplishment. Okay, God doesn't want to be accomplished. He wants to be connected with. You cannot routine God. You cannot make him a routine. You can make him a commitment and a priority. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You cannot make God a routine. You can, but you will lack the relationship and the true connection and intimacy with him. 100% you will. What he wants is your genuine heart and connection and intimacy and communication. And in order to do that, you can't schedule it. I can't schedule, like, okay, like if I'm talking about like my partner, I can't be like, okay, at every day, I'm going to call him at this time so that I'm just checking things off the task list. Like, I'm doing my things. I'm doing the things that you're supposed to do in a relationship. Like, that just sucks the life out of a relationship. That's the same thing here. So we should not have spiritual rituals. We should have spiritual practices. And these should come from number one, first and foremost, our commitment to our relationship and connection with God, with source, with spirit. Okay. That's our number one priority. And all of the practices is like asking yourself every day, like the practice itself is not necessarily like the individual action. The practice itself is like, every day I practice my connection with God, but I ask myself, what does that look like today? Is it reading? Is it prayer? Is it meditation? Usually it's all of those things. But, it's like, how do I need to connect with God today? And maybe it takes me a little bit longer. Maybe I'm able to really feel congruent, cohesive, and connected. And I'm moving through, and it's very easy. Okay. So the practices aren't about what you're doing specifically. The practices are about your commitment to your connection. That's what it's all about, you guys. That's what it's all about. The spiritual practices are about your commitment to your connection. When we try to plug in these rituals, we're losing our connection, our genuine, authentic, and transparent connection. In this relationship building, in this integration of the human and the spiritual realm, this is how we do this. We don't follow, we're moving into, collectively, we're moving into this weird spot where we're all like pushing away from pharmaceuticals and government and rules and all of these things. And we're moving into this spiritual way. But we're doing the exact same thing with psychedelics and other drugs and rituals and rules and posturing. And it's like, but then we're just packaging it in spirituality. It's like, ew, I don't know which one's worse. So it's like, we have to come to the middle if we're really going to do this right. And then the only way it's really right is because you have peace in your soul. You'll know that it's right. And the reason it's important to do it right is not to say like, oh, you'll be doomed to hell if you don't do it right. That's not what we're here to do and to talk about. What the purpose of doing it right is so that you have fruit from this spirituality. The fruit of the spirit, which is peace. Oh my gosh, so good. The fruit of the spirit is peace, forgiveness, compassion, joy, love, self-control. It's all these things, non-judgment, it's purpose, it's passion. You should have this fruit. You deserve this fruit. And whether you're the most enlightened person, but you have a spiritual ego, you will not have the fruit of the spirit. And you will not have the fruit to bring forth. And quite frankly, I don't want to follow a spirituality like that. I don't want to follow an Aubrey Marcus who looks like he's constantly in disarray and torment, and he's putting himself through ayahuasca journeys to bring him to the depths of his soul, and he's crying and snotting and throwing up all over the place. I'm like, yeah, I think there's another way. And I also think like there should be kind of like a point when that becomes not needed all the time. Like I don't know, this world, this life, this experience, when you truly awaken, it's pretty magnificent. I look around me and I see everything is abundance. I see everyone is love, and I feel love. And it's like, that's the fruit. And that's why we want to integrate all of this. That's why we want to balance. That's why we want to bridge this gap between the human ego and the spiritual ego. And the world really needs this right now because we are lost, man. We are lost. We are like floundering, and it's only going to get worse. And it's like, if you don't have a true north in Jesus and in God, and you don't have your grounding and your foundation on the rock, it's like you are going to be swept away, either in the human plane or in your highly, quote unquote, spiritual plane, which is not so spiritual at all. So it's like, now's the time to figure out how to balance on this tightrope, this thin line down the middle, and get it together, in a way where there's true meaning to all of this. There's true meaning to the pain and the suffering. There's true meaning to the awakening and the bliss. And then we can bring that bliss. Oh my gosh, we can bring that bliss and that love to a world that is in suffering. And that's really the outcome here. That's really the outcome, is to take this spiritual experience and make it meaningful for yourself, living this human experience, and the people around you. No matter how big that circle comes, whether it's just your family or whether it's millions of people that you end up leading. I don't know your purpose. I know mine. And so with that being said, I just thank you all for listening. Thank you for your continued support and your continued seeking of growth and knowledge and spirituality. And I enjoy these teachings very much. I am excited for them to evolve on more of a live platform, because let me just tell you, I've been experiencing a lot of difficulties with technology lately. Everything seems to be frying around me. So I imagine at some point in the near future, most of these teachings will be done in a live setting, and I'm very excited for that. I'm very excited to fill you guys in too on everything that's been happening over these last weeks and months. And one of my upcoming guests, we will reveal that to you as well. Just a reminder, the July retreat, July 20th through the 24th. Imagine, basically this on steroids, and everything that I've could possibly have cultivated over the past 10 years of coaching, mentoring, teaching, healing, training, is kind of packaged into this retreat experience, along with the online course, which is now available on my website. By the way, you can buy each package individually, the body course, the mind course, or the spirit course, or you can buy the bundle, which I highly recommend, because then you're getting all the facets, all the pillars of your wellness, mind, body, and spirit. So go check that out on the website, sparkflc.com. And of course, as always, please rate and share this episode if it brought you value. And if you know it's going to bring someone else or others value, the best thing we could do is share. I always say, like, the best gift that people can give to me is sharing, sharing, sharing. I love you all, and I'll talk to you very soon. Peace. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Ignite the Spark Within. If this podcast brought you value, or you think it would bring someone else value, please hit that share button. My mission is to reach and help as many people as I possibly can, and you just never know who could use that one good piece of information. And hey, if you have any topics, discussion questions, or ideas for future episodes, you can reach me directly at sarah@sparkflc.com and just write podcast in the subject line. And if you haven't already, please rate the podcast on your favorite podcast channel. This helps bring awareness to the show. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're alerted for all future episodes. Please go ahead and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're interested in pursuing coaching for yourself, you can visit sparkflc.com for more information.